Hi, and welcome to Parashas Metzora. I'm Rabbi David Katz. Okay, we've had a bit of a couple days off, getting caught up on the Parsha. Here we go, we're heading into Passover. Hopefully everything will go smooth for the holidays, and the Parsha classes should go on schedule. Here, a little insight to next week. Because we do the Parsha so late into the week, getting caught up on the previous week, I had an insight in today's reading of the Torah, and next week should be pretty exciting. Just to let you know, it's going to be the Ger code as revealed in Achrimot. I generally don't give an insight to what's coming, but after studying the Parsha today on Shabbos, it should be very exciting. It's going to be written for the Jewish scholar, just so you know, but it's the essence of Ger, Tzedek, Toshav, Torah for the Noahide world. So it's exciting. Stay tuned. That's what's coming up. And right now, as obvious, we're going to be in Parashas Metzora. Let's go. Changing a bit of the flow of the shir, just as you've already probably noticed. We've completed the Zohar, thank God. The Zohar we've done it. Every Parsha has been accounted for, and the articles and the classes. We did it. Mazel tov. We finished the Zohar. With that said, the change of format is going to be a bit of an introduction, as we're doing now. The introduction will contain any news, tidbits, notes, and a flow of what's going to be in the Parsha. And then we'll go into the Parsha and cover those things that were expressed to be covered. And at the end, we will then review, going over what was covered in this year, and that should be the template we're going to follow from now on. So the Haftorah Zohar article, we finished the complete cycle, and here we go. In this Parsha of Metzora, what are we going to cover? I just lied. We're going to cover Zohar, because it is apropos. This is probably not going to be every single time, but we are going to cover Zohar today to begin with. The Zohar that we're covering is Malki Tzedek, the character Shem, and how he relates to the Zohar portion of Metzora. And I guess the reason why we're bringing it in is because actually Achrimot was the end of the Zohar learning, so Metzora effectively is the last parsha that we do. We're going to cover the Metzora literally. What is the Metzora? And allegorically, we're going to cover. That's the scope of the article, really, is what is Metzora allegorically? We're going to cover the Moshiach, redemption, and flavorful topics from the Maharal of Prague on the Metzora, how it ties it all together. And Metzora practically in the world, how can we relate to such an abstract theme as Metzora in our world today? That is what we're going to cover. And as promised, Malki Tzedek in the Zohar. Okay, Rav Ginsburg. I'm sure we're all familiar with Rav Ginsburg. He has a very interesting translation, take, whatever opinion, about Kohen Tzedek. Right? There are four craftsmen of redemption. There are many variations of the four craftsmen. Two of them you may have heard of, Moshiach and David, Moshiach and Yosef, Elijah, and Kohen Tzedek, righteous priest. Some have it as Malki Tzedek, both references to Shem. The Kohen Tzedek, as Rav Ginsburg makes clear, don't read it the righteous priest. Read it as Kohen of the language Hachana, preparation. The preparation of Tzedek. Tzedek can be Malchus, which in Hebrew is the kingdom of God or the revelation of God, the 10th attribute of God. It can be also a descriptive term for Jerusalem, specifically Zion. So it is he who prepares this level. Kohen Tzedek. He is being Kohen Tzedek. And again, as we mentioned, Rashi makes it clear in Sukkah 52b, that is the job of Shem, son of Noah. Now we have Malki Tzedek. The Zohar says Malki Tzedek is the same language as Kohen Tzedek. He's being Malki Tzedek. He's putting the kingdom, the king. Here's some improper English for you. He's kinging Tzedek. Right? We talk about Shem being Kohen Lekel Oyon, a priest to God above. And we say he's godding above. He's using names of God above. In improper English, he's godding. Right? What are you doing? You're running, you're walking. Well, Shem happens to be godding, putting God everywhere in creation. So as Melchizedek, he's kinging. He's putting the king in the proper element of kingdom, putting the king on the throne. Kabbalistically, you can say that he's drawing the levels of kindness, or attributes of Abraham, into Revelation. If you've ever read Tehillim number 110, it's a question if it's written to Abraham or to David, right? And one of the most famous verse from that, probably the most reason it's a famous verse, it's the only other place in the Tanakh that mentions Melchizedek. Ata kohen li olam al dibarti Melchizedek. You are a priest forever by my word, Melchizedek. You are a priest forever. If you say this is Abraham in the meeting of Shem at Zion, then the Zohar learns as Abraham represents kindness, we are bringing kindness into Revelation. Now, Kabbalistically, this is like the repair of everything. So Melchizedek is the level of drawing the what's called the masculine waters, the wisdom, the revelation of the divine into the revealed state. And Shem and Abraham represented that in their meeting. I mean, we could use a lot of fancy Kabbalistic terms, but that's not the scope really of now. What we're saying is that the level of the seven attributes, if anybody knows Sfirot, there's three mentalities above, which interestingly, there's three of them. They're called the Gimel Rishonim. And you take the initial letters of that phrase, Gimel Rishonim, it spells Ger. Right? And you have seven lower attributes. As Rav Ginsburg makes known, the seven lower attributes represent the seven laws of Noah on a certain level. So the Ger world is very apropos to the Tree of Life diagram. That Tree of Life diagram, the six midot, characteristics that come into the seventh of Revelation, is termed a king and a priest, which is interesting because Shem was a king and a priest, and Abraham was also a king and a priest. Shem is then that which brings the king-priest into Revelation, that of the firstborn. That process, and that's a process, is called Melchizedek. He is kinging Tzedek, Tzedek meaning that of Zion, Jerusalem, kingdom, revelation, righteousness. Interesting little tidbit, when Shem is about to leave Abraham, the Torah says he gave him Meiser Me'akol, right? And the Zohar learns it's a fifth, which is the Hey of Abraham's name. And we have a tradition in the Zohar that when Malchus, revelation, which is called Tzedek, righteousness, is rectified and filled with the light of revelation, God, the revelation of God revealed in our time, Tzedek becomes Tzedakah, the great mitzvah of Tzedakah, which our article will cover this attribute. So it shows that the Hey of Abraham is affixated to God's kingdom, and you have a proper tzedakah. Righteousness revealed on earth. That's, we have to say, there's more to say about that, but that's the gist. And one other interesting note, Metzora, the name itself. We know that you get saras, falsely translated as leprosy, when you speak lashon hara, right? When you evil speech, which detracts from the level of scholarship that you express. If I speak lashon hara a lot and openly, you can be sure I am not a true Torah scholar. If I am a true Torah scholar, it will show by my lack of open lashon hara. That's taken from the Chafetz Chaim. In the Zohar, then we learn saras is the malady you receive by speaking lashon hara. So if you have saras, you're a Metzora. And Metzora is hinted at Motzi Shem Ra, the letters of Ra in Metzora, and some of the letters of Motzi to bring out, and the implied definition is the name, Shem. So Motzi Shem Ra is bringing out an evil name. It's not exactly Lashon Hara, it's a type of Lashon Hara. Motzi Shem Ra, bringing out a bad name on somebody, is hinted at in Metzora. You can hear it, it's very close. Metzora, Motzi Shem Ra. And we are ready for the article. Okay, what is Metzora? The scope of the article actually does not take place in Metzora, it takes place in Tazria. In Tazria, we have something called sapachat, right? Sapachas. It's a type of malady of the skin, and this is what we're going to focus on in this article. But, to tie in Metzora is what comes out. It is sapachas. It's a type of malady, and maybe it will develop into tsaras. I don't know. If it develops into tsaras, you now become a Metzora. As a Metzora, you need to go to see the Kohen, the priest, appear in the temple, and receive, whatever that needs to be done. You'll go outside the camp, get sprinkled, whatever the remedy is to come. Thus, the Parsha Metzora dealing with a person who is a Metzora. Very cut and dry, clear, not much juicy, flavorful topics in the scope of the verses in terms of deriving anything that's fantastic without digging. There's no mention of the ger per se, and it would come across as a little dry. That does not mean the Torah is dry there. In fact, the scope of this article in class is to show you how dry it is not. And that's why we back up to Tazria when we mention the sapachas. Because as the Torah is going, and the Torah is boring for any beginner, I think. Outside of creation and the Adam and Eve and Noah and the boat, and it's exciting, and Abraham, go to the land of Israel. Once you clear Genesis and you enter Exodus is interesting, the redemption. By the time you get to Leviticus, Vayikra, raise your hand if you are asking what time we start Bamidbar. I mean, that's Bal Tshuva 101. Vayikra is a very hard book to get into. We're dying to get back into Bamidbar. Finish up with Devarim, bring on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and start afresh with Sukkot with Genesis. Well, here we are in the world of the Ger. Thank God, the book of Vayikra, which is also called Torah Kohanim, the Torah of priests. Also, that's the lave, the heart of the Torah. To me, it's the most exciting and fantastic part of Torah. I mean, so far we've had Vayikra and Sav bringing in Gerim into the normative law. We've had Tazria with Naaman. How great is Naaman? Here we are in Metzora. We're going to talk about Moshiach and the Maharal and all kinds of things. Next week in Achrei Mot, it's a smorgasbord how much we could talk about. We're going to talk about the Ger Code, which is going to be fantastic. And if I didn't want to do that, there's the famous attribute, a non-Jew who learns Torah is like a high priest. That's next week's Parsha. Well, this week, but it's going to be next week's Parsha. Vayikra is amazing when you enter the world of the Ger. So, but if you stick to the text in its dogmatic, draconian point of view, it is what it is. Enter the Maharal of Prague and the alternative universe of the Metzora, and we come to, from the mouth of God, we heard two. Mepia Gevura. At Sinai, God spoke one, and we heard two. Everything in the Torah has two sides to it. At least. For everything God says, there can be an alternative universe. This is the essence of creation, which is also called tzedakah. God is good. God desires then as good. The good desire is to create Olam Haba, a perfect place for those that God creates to put there. Now, to get to Olam Haba, there must be a creation, right? We have to create Olam Haba. God creates Olam Haba. And by creating Olam Haba, there's a creation process. On the first day, the second day, however in God's universe it comes out as a creation process. God sees in his infinite wisdom. If I give consciousness to the creation process, then that will be the means of which who or what will enter Olam Haba. For example, God says, I am going to create the world, and part of the creation of the world will be built with Bob. Bob is part of creation, right? God says, I have a stick called Bob, and Bob, we create this. And God creates with Bob. And God says, tragic to not utilize Bob. Bob can be conscious. Let's say Bob is the Friend of God program. So it comes out in reality, in this world, we call him Yedidiel, right? The friend of God. Reuel, the friend of God. So Bob is born in this world. His parents name him Reuel. And he lives this program, this existence called the Bob life. But on a deeper level, he's living the Friend of God program. And each one of us has a name, and we are a function, and we are a creative tool to God he creates with us. Our job is to learn that creation. Torah then is the means of learning your life, learning your creation tool aspect as it exists in the hand of God. Should I become conscious, I will become aware of what my job in creation is. Then I can assist God in creation. As God creates, the David Katz program is creating with God in an ideal world. By that means, I have received the tzedakah from God. I was simply a program, so are you. Should we merit it, God willing, you are aware of the consciousness God gives you in this world to know God as he's creating the world to come. When you get to the world to come, you will then see what the Creator was doing with those he was creating with. The job of a righteous soul in this world is to become aware of God creating with him. The Torah is the means of that revelation. That revelation is the tzedakah that we define as the 10th attribute, that of the kingdom, the malchus, the revelation of God. By that means, everything has a duality in nature. I am David Katz, I'm a guy in Sfat, I have a life, and I am not that aware of God on this level on a daily basis. However, in God's universe, there's the David Katz program, everybody has this program. Right? We have names that matter to God. Our job is to make those names matter. There's a Metzora that is simply a malady of skin, and it's just another topic in a Torah of technicalities. But yet on a flip side, God has a whole world of the Metzora. Talk about the Ger, Naaman, the Torah's intellect, the redemption. The Metzora takes a different path. From the mouth of God we heard too. There's the Metzora that lives in our Parsha, and we'll see you next year at this time. But then once we close the book, and we go off to Achrei Mos next week, and the Metzora is a forgotten memory, there's a whole world of Metzora that lives on. Right? Just like a Star Trek movie, right? Or episode. You have an episode about Captain Sisko meets a guy named, let's just say Quark, right? Quark is the bartender of Deep Space Nine. You could have a whole mini-series about Quark. Yet he's still just a character on Deep Space Nine. So for the analogy to hold, we are on Deep Space Nine, and Quark is just a character that's the Metzora. But if you go into the sub-series, Quark becomes a whole different world, so does the Metzora. There's a whole world of Metzora. The Metzora exists outside the camp. That's it. You have tsaras, goodbye. Go get your remedy from the priest. Go to the Beis Hamikdash and have a nice evening. As we mentioned in Tazria, a type of malady that becomes an affliction of tsaras could be sapachas. I don't know what sapachas is. It's not even translated. It's just this malady. Rashi explains that it's a skin problem that can become tsaras. Very interesting. Very interesting. Because again, in this world of the mouth of God, I heard too. We say that harsh on Israel like thorns are Gerim. It's a famous dictum in the Talmud. And what does it mean, thorns? It's a bad translation. It's actually the word sapachas. And it's translated as overgrowth or thorns. So why does Rashi say it's a skin condition? You want to say harsh on Israel like skin conditions are Gerim. That's where we're going to go. When we get into the exegesis of Metzora. The exegesis is we have to penetrate what is the matter of the word Metzora. What does it mean in its not pshat territory? Simple meaning. We say by the Maharal of Prague, by the Talmud Sanhedrin, many places, Moshiach is a Metzora. Now already we're getting out of the scope of simple meaning. Right? We're going to get into what it means for the Mashiach. What does it mean that Gerim are sapachas? To not mean in a literal skin malady. That not to say that Gerim are lepers, poorly translated. All the more so Mashiach. But what it comes down to is, to understand this on any level, you need the Torah of Emunah first. It has to be so real that there's a Metzora, it's real, it's in my time, I can have a relationship with it, that it manifests in our world, then can we fathom these things about the Gerim, Mashiach, Torah, Seichel, intellect. But that's the challenge. You read about Metzora and you say, oh, God, come on, this is horrible. I don't know, I'm not in the temple with skin conditions and priests, and just, can we get to, move on? You have to be able to come to love things like this. Metzora, Saras, all these things in the Torah. Some are easier than others. The curses, the blessings. All the matters of Torah must be so real that they are real. The ger must be so real that if I meet one and I know I'm talking to one in front of me, I must be sure and believe with Emunah Shlema, this is a real ger. And the ger realized this is a real Jew. And if you were standing before a king, you would say, this is a real king. And what's the chiddush? Sometimes you may be before a true king. Ben David will be in the generation, the remnant of the seed of Ben David. An aspect of the king lives. I, for example, am a Kohen. So if we have to have faith, what is a Kohen in our time? You should be able to ascertain what that means. It's not so easy to do. But the more we learn of the matters and internalize it and make it real and make it relevant, Torah becomes real. It becomes a reality. We live in that world of God revealed to us. Because when God's creating, even if there's not a temple standing, if you're a Kohen, if you are an aspect of the kingship, if you are a ger, you better believe that as God is creating, you are real. If you're real to God, you're real to me. It comes out that the Saras and Metzora is a major player of redemption. Right? We know by Judah and by Joseph, there's a famous idea that as Judah was messing around with his endeavors, we say, what was God doing with Joseph? Sowing the light of redemption. So as we're passing by with the Metzora, God, in a sense, is sowing the redemption with the Metzora. The Maharal of Prague makes a couple of famous statements. One, Seichel is a ger in this world. The Torah intellect is a ger in this world. Moshiach, he brings from Sanhedrin, is a Metzora. Those statements come together to make a fantastic learning experience. The Maharal explains like this. The world is physical. We know that. This is Olam Hazeh. It's a physical world. And that world is driving in repentance towards Mashiach. Only Mashiach is spiritual. So he's not revealed until the world has changed into final condition status physical. Until then, the world is opposed to Mashiach by nature. So he is outside the camp. Once he's outside the camp, he's outside the camp. And that's why the Talmud Sanhedrin 98b calls him a Metzora by the words of Rashi. One of his names is, he's the for the word Siora or something, he's the ill of the house of Rebbe. By the same token, the Gerei Tzadikim that we pray for in the Shmona Esrei prayer, the Gerei Tzedek, the Maharal says are the Gerim non-Jews, which is the same idea as Seichel is a ger in this world. The Torah intellect is a ger in this world. And the Maharal learns it is as, I forget which verse it is, you will stand for a Torah scholar. I think the next phrase is a verse in the Torah, something about the ger. And a ger in your midst. So he learns by hekish, by combining the scholar and the ger. And by that right, the Gerei Tzadikim, we find out, are the non-Jews. Because the beginning of that verse talks about the elders. So here you have the condition of Mashiach is a Metzora. Gerim are related to Torah scholars. Torah scholars are the world of intellect. Intellect is a ger in this world. Mashiach represents perfected world through Torah. And as Mashiach is a Metzora, Metzora is sapachas. Sapachas is the phrase harsh on Israel like thorns or gerim. It's a tremendous polka dot expression of all these things that connect. Again, gerim are sapachas, right? Thorns on Israel. Don't translate it thorns, translate it as malady. That same malady is Mashiach. Mashiach is spiritual and not physical. Thus, Mashiach is outside the camp. If Mashiach is outside the camp, we compare Mashiach to elders. Elders are compared to Gerim. Gerim are called Sapachas. They're also outside the camp. Thus, you have outside the camp Mashiach and Gerim. Mashiach and Gerim are united outside the camp. Mashiach is the intellect of Torah called a ger in this world. The Gerim are called Sapachas, which Mashiach is a Metzora. It's there. It is there. In the end of the day, you have a physical world of Jews and non-Jews trying to get along, and looking in from the outside is Mashiach and the Gerim, who are existing in what will eventually be the world of the ger. Not that the Mashiach and the Gerim will join the regular world, in that the world will join Mashiach and Gerim. For that reason, King David said, I am a ger. Okay. Now that those are the categories of the Maharal. The statements of the Maharal to make one big picture. Mashiach is the Metzora, he's outside the camp. Torah intellect is a ger in this world. Gerim are called Sapachas. Gerim are compared to Torah scholars. Mashiach is spiritual, the world's physical. Put that together, that's the image we have. Thus, you can understand now why we say harsh on Israel like thorns or Gerim. Making Gerim are very harsh on Israel. Because you're bringing people who are spiritual and you're dealing with them in a physical world that they reject. They want Mashiach, they want Torah intellect. We say we want iPods and iPhones. It's going to be very problematic to do this experience called making Gerim, which goes back to Abraham and Shem as illustrated by Sefer Yetzirah on a mystical level. The creation and making of Gerim. Making Gerim is not easy. Kabbalistically, it's hard. When you bring a Ger to Torah, what happens when he goes off? If you didn't succeed, he's too far away right now. The entanglement and impurities come inside. Amalek, he's vulnerable to an attack. He becomes an antagonist on Israel. Now, by bringing him in, he is a potential threat. Harsh on Israel like thorns or Gerim. That's the reason the Rambam brings. So to convert somebody on another level, right, to bring somebody into a Jew is problematic. It also exists for all Gerim. Not to become a convert per se, but any level of association with Israel, when it goes wrong, it can go very wrong, and you get other religions out of it as well, as we see. But it can also be a merit, right? The Ger makes a Jew step up to be a Jew. And it's very hard. You're saying, hey everybody, I am the Ger, I'm here with Moshiach, so to speak, on an intuitive level, and we want you guys in physicality to raise up to spirituality of the intellect of Torah and perfect the world. Have a go. Not too popular as it comes out. But if we're going to have the world of physicality become spiritual, I have to say Moshiach and the Gerim will prevail in the end. And that's why the world changes. The world is changing, which is called the birth pangs of Messiah, from physical to a world that caters to this world of Ger/Mashiach. There are many midrashim that explain and represent Mashiach ben David as he who sits with, for lack of better translation, lepers. That's where that comes from. The people with bandages and wounds, but let's just use a poor translation to convey the meaning of a leper, Metzora, Tsaras, Mashiach ben David, and the connotation with Gerim, meaning Mashiach sits with those outside the camp, the Gerim. And we're not saying that there is a leprosy here, or a skin condition, or thorns. It is the opposite view or philosophy of the world, i.e. the spiritual versus physicality. And the world is in conspiracy to keep the world physical, whereas the Mashiach, God, and Gerim conspire to bring the world back to God, filling the world with the knowledge of God, that of the spiritual, the place of the eventual third temple. Society is this. If you find that you are outside the camp with a bit of emunah, you might be with Mashiach in his world. We all, even Jews have the ability to say, I am a Ger. David did it. He's the last, let's say, in that line, but the forefathers, even though they were Gerim, people think they were Jews. Abraham was a Ger. He's Ger v'toshav hayim. So all through time, there have been Jews who understand what it is to be a Ger. There have been Gerim who become Gerim. What it is that when you are in the spiritual sect of society, and you are in opposition to gross physicality and exploitation, you are probably a Ger. Whether you are a Jew or a non-Jew, really your being is probably as a Ger. You are something in this world that you feel, I don't belong here. And you find happiness and peace and comfort with others that are like-minded. That is, let's say, the Ger with Mashiach, so to speak. The Torah really has, from this aspect, two stories. There's the Metzora, there's the priest, the temple, Lashon Hara, a whole world of Metzora. Right? All that Metzora proper brings. the same time, there's the Metzora that comes, Naaman, Saras, Moshiach, the Maharal, spirituality, physicality, harsh on Israel like thorns, making Gerim, a whole world of Gerim, Metzora, Moshiach, redemption is right there, parallel to this theme in the Torah of the temple, the priest, and they're really side by side. And at some point, when we have a better perspective of life, we can probably look at Parashas Metzora and say, yeah, I see it. And somebody asked me, why didn't Aaron go outside the camp when Miriam got busted with Moses? And I realized, Miriam represents the Jews. She going outside the camp. She left Aaron and Moses. Moses and Aaron represent Mashiach / priest. Right? The Mashiach who's the Metzora. So Moses and Aaron, Mem Aleph, Moshe Aaron represent Mashiach Eliyahu, Mem Aleph, to begin the words. Miriam was the part that had to go. The Metzora, Mem, that had to go. She had to go out. That's why Aaron didn't go. And so it's an analogy or a mashal to show she attacking Moses had the view of, let's say, the people, and the people represent where the Ger and Mashiach are in Aaron and Moshe. There's a camp of physicality in the world today. The camp is out there. And if you're outside the camp, know why. Know your position. Know how you're perceived. Harsh on Israel. Now you can make that however you want to make it. And you can use it as an encouragement. If you choose to be an antagonist, it's on you. But understand that the light of Mashiach comes just like that paraduma, the red heifer. That when you find Ein Mashiach Yisrael, there's no Messiah of Israel. He's out of the camp. That becomes the conduit, the impurity from the purity from the impurity, from the no Messiah to the Messiah, the antithesis of logic, anti-logic. You find the path of Messiah. From the Metzora, where there's no Messiah, you find the path of the Messiah. The other side follows the normative Metzora. They follow the physicality, the realm where we think Mashiach is. The more we put Miriam outside the camp, so to speak, the more we put the Sutra Achra into physicality, claiming that there is the Messiah, then you'll find that the world of spirituality is free of the other side. And that's where the pathway to redemption begins, with the real Metzora. The union of the Mashiach and the Gerim is not a surprise. The end of Parashas Vayechi in the Bereshis Rabbah explains that the scholarship of Messiah truly and purely exists for the Gerim. So again, the Maharal's words, Seichel is a ger in this world, Mashiach is a Metzora, they are a natural fit. And as we're going to find out next week in Achrei Mos, the ger code is synonymous in none other than a way of learning the simple meaning of the Torah. There is no code. There is simply learning pshat. And that is what the ger is, represents, and Mashiach employs. The world of the ger becomes a reality for everybody. That world of physicality is left behind. There are several things in our world, maybe everything, when the simple meaning is revealed, it is the ger. Mashiach, the Chafetz Chaim says the Ark of the Covenant is a ger, traveling from place to place. Hashem is a ger in our world, not indigenous here. The Beis Hamikdash, Torah, intellect. When it comes down to it, what isn't a ger here? That's why the Zohar explains the greatest merit and accomplishment in Torah is making gerim. With that said, we have now covered Parashas Metzora. Parashas Metzora, what did we cover? We covered the deeper aspects of Metzora. Melchizedek, who was the time period of Gerim, pre-Sinai, linking with Abraham, making Gerim. We covered the Metzora. What is the Metzora? Saras, Lashon Hara. All the skin maladies. And Metzora allegorically. What is it allegorically? Why? Where does it lead to? The Messiah, redemption. We explain how not only is it allegorically these things, but literally in a Torah of Emunah, it is the Messiah, it's the Gerim, and even today, you can be a Metzora. Sounds like a bad infomercial, right? You can be a Metzora. But literally, if you're outside the camp, you are a Metzora. But not is a problem. You're not a malady, you're not a thorn. You are a spiritual being who has rejected the falseness of society, and you are with God awaiting the redemption. Whether you think you have an idea of what redemption is with Moshiach, Moshiach is your teammate. He is our teammate as we are outside the camp, and we are waiting for the camp to join the camp. Practically today, you have Jews and Gerim running around. They are really one type of Ger. The Ger who exists with Moshiach, Moshiach who is the Metzora. The Metzora is outside the camp. If you're outside the camp, you are a Sapachas. Sapachas is harsh on Israel because you bring them to the intellect of Torah and a path of redemption. That is what we covered in class. I hope you enjoyed the Parashas Metzora. Stay tuned next week for Achrei Mot, and we'll get into learning the Torah on a Pshat level, which is my least favorite thing to say, the Torah code of the Ger. Thank you. Have a great week.